Well, how you doing? One of the things that I am endeavoring to do from time to time is to read some of these great articles from these great magazines of the past. This one here, again, is taken from the Western Horseman magazine of May 1962. So I was 3 years old, May 1962, from the Western Horseman magazine. I think it might still be a magazine that's still in publication. I don't know. But today I want to read an article, and let me just get it ready here, on the Stetson hat, the Stetson cowboy hat. I found it to be a nice article, and I like to read this. Obviously, you're not going to find this in some, for those who might be legally blind and so forth, you're not going to find this, on some Audible thing that you can download. So I'll go ahead and read it. So it's lengthy, but I think it's enjoyable, and I'll do my best to read it. My eyesight is going. The article is accompanied by different pitches and old ads for the Stetson cowboy hat. The name of the article is entitled "The Stetson Story" from May 1962. It's an article written, again, it's called "The Stetson Story" by a writer by the name of Fred Harvey. So let me go ahead and read that. Forgive me if I make some mistakes along the way. I'm making this much as if I was to read it to my wife or my kids or something. So I'll do my best. Okay, "The Stetson Story" by Fred Harvey. A petrified hat arrived at the American Museum of Natural History on September 16th, 1936, from Sam G. Wingfield of Park Avenue, New York. So they got a hat sent to them, this museum. Credit for the gift, a letter stated, was to be given to Mr. John B. Stetson, Jr., also of New York City. Legend has it that on a trip to the Arizona territory in 1901, or the state of Arizona in 1901, John B. Stetson Jr., the son of the founder of the first all-felt Western hat company, he tossed his well-worn Stetson into what's called Fossil Creek near the Great Natural Bridge. And then 2 decades later, the hat was recovered, and it had turned into a 40-pound hunk of limestone, still shaped in the recognizable form of the Stetson hat. So I think there's something to Google. There's something for you all to Google. Look into the petrified Stetson hat. See if there's anything on Google. I'll look that up myself. If I find a picture of it, I'll put it in here. However, reading back to the article, according to Stetson officials, the story has not been substantiated. So, whatever. This article's written in the 60s, so I'd still go check it out. Continuing to read here. Yet it is well worth repeating for the Colt 6 gun and the blue denim Levi pants. The Stetson is part of the early American tradition. The Stetson Company has been in the hat business for 97 years, since 1865, and has manufactured over 200 million hats. That is now more than one for every man, woman, and child in the country at its present population. The old ranchers and cowboys and trailmen thought so highly of the Stetson that they used the word and the hat interchangeably. So give me my Stetson or give me my hat, that kind of thing, even if it wasn't a Stetson. That's how much they have a grip they had. Returning to the article, it says, the first hat John Batterson Stetson ever made, that was his name, John Batterson Stetson. The first hat he ever made in the West, he sold for $5 in gold in the Pikes Peak region during the gold rush. It wasn't luck. Stetson had learned the hat-making business from his father as a boy in New Jersey. When his father died, young Stetson, who had tuberculosis, was given a few years to live by the doctors of that day, and so he decided to head west. At St. Joseph, Missouri, he got a job in a brickyard, and he soon became part owner of that brickyard. 2 years later, the brickyard, built on the banks of the Missouri, was washed out by the rampaging river, and his interest was wiped out in that business. The Civil War was being fought at the time, and Stetson tried to join the ranks, but he was rejected for disability reasons. Several young men near his own age were going to hike to Pikes Peak, which was 750 miles away, so Stetson joined the group of his friends. The trek did the frail young man good, for he regained his health roughing it under the stars. All Stetson had left to his name were the clothes on his back, and he had a hatchet, and he had a shotgun. While in camp, a discussion arose whether or not cloth was made only by weaving, and Stetson disagreed and proceeded to make some cloth through the felting method. Taking some rabbit and some beaver skins, he shaved off the fur with his hatchet, and then with a hickory sapling and a thin slice of rawhide, he fashioned a bow to work the fur. Planting his homemade bow into the middle of the pile of the fur, he struck gently with the bowstring, agitating the fur and keeping it up in the air. And the coarse fur and the foreign matter fell to the ground. And then Stetson pushed this out of the way, and eventually only the fine hair was left. And then he took to working longer, and he kept the fine hair in the air until it soon fell down by its own weight. And with a mouthful of water, young Stetson sprayed it, and this made a thin mat of fur that could be lifted up. And then he dipped the fur mat into a pot of boiling water for a few seconds, and he worked it with his hands. Every few minutes, he would quickly dip the matted fur in the hot water, and as it shrank, he manipulated it with his fingers, shaping it into a smooth cloth. And there he proved his point. For a year, Stetson mined for gold. By now, he had grown into a big man with big ideas and ambitions to once again make hats, the best hats. So he headed back to Philadelphia. With the $100 he had in his pockets, he bought some tools, and he rented a small room on 7th and Callow Hill Streets. This was his first shop. The year was 1865. His first hats were replicas of the popular style of the day. He was unable to sell many, though. And then thinking over the situation, he decided that anyone could make the same style hats. Why not start his own creations? So he made a design, and going from dealer to dealer, he tried to sell his original creation. And they laughed at him. Now let me turn the page to page 162 here. Bear with me. So they laughed at him. They laughed at his design. He took it to some stores. So it says they laughed at him. Nothing doing, he was told. In many instances, the dealers even refused to see him. It was enough to make a man lose faith. But Stetson had gone through too much to give up without a struggle. And one day he went the rounds again, taking his hat out. And this time he wore a hat made from the finest furs. It was light in weight, 2 ounces. The average hat weighed 4 ounces. Wearing it slightly cocked over one eye, he jauntily went and walked around into the store of a dealer who had been trying hard to sell stuff. He took off his hat and he showed it to the dealer, letting him feel the soft texture and emphasizing the light weight of his product. A customer in the store also examined the hat. A smile came over his face. "I'll take that hat," he said. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out some money. "Name your price," he said, and the dealer ordered Stetson to make him a dozen more hats. Back at his shop, he ordered the finest furs he could buy, and he began to fill his first order. It looked like he had finally made the grade. He didn't make much money, but he was becoming well known as the maker of a quality hat. One day, a crisis occurred. He had been buying $10 worth of the finest furs every week, and the furs were delivered Monday morning and came tied up in batches. This particular Monday morning, he found that he did not have the necessary $10 payment. The furs would be here any minute. What was he going to do? He didn't have time to decide what to do. The delivery man was coming up the stairs. So entering the small room, the man threw the bundle of fur on the floor, saying, "The old man says it ain't necessary to send the money for a week." Stetson almost cried with happiness because the guy wasn't looking for the money right away, and from then on he was a firm believer in luck. Several days later, while working, he suddenly remembered the first crude hat that he had sold for $5 in gold. Why not make hats for Westerners? The market had unlimited possibilities. They wanted good quality hats, and they didn't mind paying the price. Why haggle over prices with the Philadelphia dealers? The local markets he was supplying paid off in a small change way, and the competition was very stiff. He could make fine large hats for the Western cattle kings. That's right, hats were for the cattle kings. His hat would be called the Boss of the Plains. The Boss of the Plains. So sure was he that he was on the right track, that he used all his capital plus all he could borrow. He got the names of all the clothing dealers in the Southwest and sent them each one of his hats. Along with it, he sent a letter asking them to order at least a dozen. The hat had a 4-inch brim and a 4-inch top with a strap for a band. Would he get orders? He could only wait and pray. Within 2 weeks, orders came pouring in. "Please send us a dozen hats like the sample. Send 1 dozen, send 2 dozen. Many of the buyers sent cash ahead. Fill my order right away." The enthused Stetson now sent out samples. What better and cheaper way to advertise? With this in mind, he sent out letters that if a man wanted his hats immediately, then he should send the cash in advance. It was a novel idea and it caught on. His Boss of the Plains hats retailed at $5. A finer grade of the same sold for $10. And his best, made from pure beaver, sold for as much as $30. The hats sold like hotcakes. Money came in, orders piled up. His business expanded and he moved to his first new plant at 4th and Montgomery Avenue, 3 miles out of the town area. There was a 3-story building, 100 feet long and 30 feet wide. Before long, the name Stetson became a household word. All that was necessary when going into a store was to say, "Show me a Stetson," and the storekeeper knew. A cowboy or rancher feels undressed without his Stetson. He treats it rough, drinks out of it, and he wears it all the time, except when he goes to bed. However, he lifts it politely when he meets a lady. After the Boer War, B-O-E-R, after the Boer War, General Baden-Powell ordered 10,000 Stetsons for his South African police force. This probably set the style for the Canadian Mounties and for the Texas Rangers. Famed movie and TV Western heroes, past and present, proudly wear the Stetson. Tom Mix, William S. Hart, Buck Jones, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and many others display the Stetson trademark. There are 12 basic styles for men, varying with the shape of the brim, the trim, and the crown. One brim might have a raw edge, which means that the felt is not trimmed in any way. A bound edge means that a ribbon binding is stitched around the brim, and a welt edge means the felt is folded back onto itself and stitched. The rim can be narrow or wide. The crown can be tapered or straight, or tapered and straight, and it can be high or low. Whatever shape the wearer desires, he can get. Stetson officials report, looking at a single strand of fur under a microscope, you can see that the sides are covered with tiny scales. When cleaned fur is matted together, these tiny scales interlock, holding the fur together. Hold on. When the fur is alternately dipped in hot water and gently squeezed, the fibers come closer together, either by chemical or mechanical action. It shrinks to about 1/3 its original size, and it becomes a smooth fabric known as felt. Before the Stetson is completed, it goes through 14 operations: blowing, pouncing, forming, sizing, trimming, and blocking, and other fashioning, or rather I should say finishing procedures. The famous 10-gallon hat is a name applied to the large Western hat. Its name has nothing to do with the amount of water it holds, but it is an adaptation of a Mexican word with a similar sound. The lighter weight Stetson is about 2.5 ounces. Stetson wearers are faithful. According to Stetson Company officials, 1,000 hats are cleaned at their renovating department weekly. The oldest hat still in use was manufactured in the 1880s. Many people have worn their same Stetson for 40 or 50 years. They wear like iron and are just as tough. William Buffalo Bill Cody wore the high-grade beaver Stetson, and Gene Autry wears a white Stetson and has a closet full of them. The Stetson is sold all over the world and is not limited to the Western style. The most important thing is quality, and in this they have succeeded. Whether the legend of the petrified hat is true or not, Stetson will apparently go on forever too. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that article on the Stetson hat. If you'd like to share any articles, let me know and I'll read them. Or you can read them and I'll send them out. Bye-bye.